No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about something. I've been seeing a lot of articles and lists recently. We're in that time of year where all the HR consultants and all the blog sites out there are coming up with their lists of the trends for 2023 that have happened, the changes and differences we've seen in 2023 when it comes to leadership. And one of the things that I've been seeing more on more of these lists that I think is an interesting one, and I agree with it, and I think it's something to talk about, is this switch in the way leaders lead to a more democratic style of leadership. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about different styles of leadership and how they might be appropriate in different circumstances. But specifically when it comes to the democratic style of leadership, that's essentially making sure that your people are a part of the decision-making process with you when it comes to things, that you're not just unilaterally making decisions when it comes to strategy and execution that then have to trickle down to them just executing, that they're more likely to execute well and to be bought into the solutions and to the strategy if they were involved in creating that strategy to begin with. And I think that's no surprise to people, but where it's changing is in that it's not just about the high level strategy or about getting insights on, an employee engagement survey. It is about the day-to-day, how you interact with people and how their insights need to influence the way you lead them and make decisions on a day-to-day basis. I think some leaders are very good at this and some leaders are having more difficulty with this because it essentially changes the way that they have always felt that, what their title gives them or what responsibilities they have because they are the leader. And so what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's good dialogue to have. And I think sometimes what trips up leaders in that space is that are we being democratic about the expectation or about how we're going to meet the expectation, right? And I think that's
so different.
It's very, very different, right? Yeah. And so I think that the proper way and the way to really make that a thing is to be really clear about what the expectations are, and then celebrating the fact that we're going to talk about how do we do this, and this is where we want to have some dialogue and some debate, and we want to get some insight and talk to the team and really understand perspectives and thoughts and ideas, and that's kind of the idea of the democratic space here. Is I think that, as this has evolved, and I like that this is a big topic because I think for so long, for a lot of organizations, there's a few people that have really big opinions on what should happen.
Right.
And they have a lot of reason to kind of push that forward because it continues to provide somebody with a level of authority when it's I have the power to make these decisions. My ideas are going to shift and change, an organization through the strategy. And I think that by opening that up and by really being intentional around not only that there are people in the conversation, but who is in that conversation is a really important thing. But you won't be able to understand who the right people are and what types of things should be democratic unless you start to do more of it across the board. So you have to get comfortable in the space of saying, let's talk about this and let's find this out. And then finding, not only finding those that bring ideas and solutions, but also providing the space for everyone to be able to kind of talk through some of these things, especially when it comes to the actual job that they do. I think the other mistake sometimes is we want to include people that this is not actually their category number one job to do this thing, but we want to get their opinion on it. And It's kind of they could have a good idea, but really if we're going to be about, the democratic leadership style, we should be talking to those people that actually do this thing and give it more weight to them.
Yeah, I know you're spot on with that. In thinking through this, I'm thinking that the leaders that have the biggest problem with this aren't necessarily the ones who feel like their authority is being undermined with the democratic process in general. It's the leaders who really lean into it when it comes to how things get done, and they do it well. And then they get kind of walked on by their people who think that means that everything about their job responsibilities, and the job expectations should also be up for debate, right? And in most cases, if you are a leader of people, you aren't the one making up what those expectations are. They were given to you. And you have those expectations, and then you have to communicate them to your people, but you're not creating those expectations. They were created by a larger organizational or broader structure. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is how do you navigate that? If you're making sure that you're being inclusive of people in the execution of the strategy or what the strategy is, and then the pushback you're getting basically is, I think we should really change the way that I know that my job is this, but it really should be more of like this. How do you impress upon them what their job is without kind of making them feel excluded from the democratic process? And so I want to ask you that, but first I want to give a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, how do you make people feel like they are included in this process and to lead with a democratic style of leadership without kind of sacrificing the ability to hold people accountable to what the actual job expectations are?
I think you have to be clear with people. Like, there's going to be times when you have the conversation where somebody's going to express what they feel and what they think about something. And then, as a leader saying like, hey, I can understand that. We can discuss many things, but the expectation of the role or the job or what exactly it is that is here in the job description or the things that you should be doing, like, that's not up for like kind of negotiation or kind of changing. Like that is what the job is. So if this job specifically, what you're telling me is that like this doesn't work for you, I can understand that. I can show you empathy. I can understand that. But that means that we have to have a different conversation about what jobs may be, and do those jobs exist here, or is that job somewhere else? Right. But I think that it's in those moments when leaders don't speak up and say, actually, no, like that's not something that we have either influence over. That's not something that we're going to change. That's not something that organizationally is aligned with our values, or that's something that's completely out of scope of what the actual thing is that we do here. Like the confidence to tell people like, no, that's not a thing that we would have any type of like democratic conversation about. Here are the things that we can definitely talk about. So again, I'm going to give you the space for it to be democratic. I'm going to listen to your point of view. I'm going to make sure that you're a part of some of these conversations on how we get some of this work done when we have that capability. But these things are not things that we're going to kind of talk about. And I think in some moments, like you said a little bit earlier, like sometimes leaders can feel like, oh my gosh, if I shut that down, is that shutting down the whole thing? Well, no, only if you do that. Only if you say, we're not talking about all these things. You, as a leader, you have to say, I'm comfortable saying no to that. That's not something that we would talk about. That's not something that we would change. That's not something that is like just based upon the work that we do here in our company organization. Like that's just how we do things here. Like that is the expectation of us being here. And if that doesn't work for you, that's okay. Like I'm not here to judge you for that, but we have to accept that as a thing. And then we can have a different conversation about what's best for you. But like that is not going to be something that we will kind of table and figure out, or I don't have to like get back with you on that one. I can tell you right now, like that's not going to be a thing that we're gonna talk through. So like I think leaders have to do that. If you want to be clear with people around the kind of what is the sandbox of things, but then you also have to make sure that you give them the sandbox, like that we can sit in the sandbox and work through the things that we do have some control over.
Right. I think a really good litmus test for this of what falls into which category is just simply as a leader, ask yourself, is what's being asked even possible? Meaning, does the work still get done? You know what the expectations are as the leader. You know what you've been given, the tasks you've been given to get done. You know what the expectations of the role are. If what is being talked about, if it goes the way that the employee is looking to have it go, is it possible to go that way and still accomplish the objectives you've been given as part of your role as the leader in this organization? And if the answer is yes, then have at it. Like, talk it through, see if it works. Having something work or not work in practice does more for buy-in or not buy-in than you saying yes or no to something. The employee needs to see it in action. It's the same reason why a kid is going to touch the stove no matter how many times you tell them it's hot. They won't touch it a second time. Once touch it the first time, though. They want to see it play out. So if you see it potentially working, then absolutely let it play out. Let them do what they want to do. Let them be involved in the process, because if it doesn't work, that will give you the credibility to say, okay, here's why I think it didn't work out, and let's go through and talk about this out again. If you know for a fact it's not possible for you to get done your job in this way, then that's when it has to shut down. That's when you have to say, there's a line here where we can't cross, where this is the role and these are the expectations, and we can't just throw them out the window because you don't like those expectations. We can work together on how you're going to get them done, but they do still have to get done. And I think that if leaders are clear about that, and they give the leeway to play, like you said, the sandbox, they give that leeway to play wherever they can, those things playing out in real time are the things that give the leader credibility to say, all right, now can you trust that I at least know something about what I'm doing here, that I know something about how this needs to play out.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.